Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chef One podcast, and we start today's show with the big news that Fernando Alonso is signing a contract extension with Aston Martin. Now, silly season has kicked off this year. Lewis Hamilton, of course, jumping ship to Ferrari at the end of the season, leaving that Mercedes seat wide open. And I even predicted Fernando Alonso to take that seat for 2025. But that has been squashed. He's now staying at Aston Martin, generating lots of debate online whether that was the correct decision or not. Seb and Amy are here to help me decide whether Fernando Alonso should stay or should go from Aston Martin. And Seb, we'll start with you. Is it the right move for Fernando Alonso? I'll just jump straight into the deep end. Should he have signed on a longer contract?
I'm going to say no. I think going elsewhere, I think Red Bull. For me, that's the one. If he wants to have another shot at the title, he's got to be brave, take the plunge and go up against Max Verstappen. I think this is quite a conservative move.
Yeah.
I think that from 2026 onwards, yes, Aston Martin looks like a really good seat to go for because the new Honda engines and obviously the new regulations. I think going there then is a really good proposition. But, Alonso's not going to be any younger at that point. He's going to be, 45?
Yeah.
So I don't think actually Aston Martin or Honda will maybe even want to keep him at that point. I think there's an opportunity now to go to Red Bull. They're the quickest car. They're going to be next season. They probably want you. They would probably go for it. I don't know whether, he's going to receive criticism for this or not, but I do think he's, shying away from a fight with Verstappen. I think that's the only reason, because if Verstappen wasn't there, obviously he'd go to Red Bull. So I think that must be the only reason it hasn't. It's still, Aston Martin are still going to be competitive 2025. They're not slow by any means, but they're not going to be challenging for a title. And at Alonso's age, he has to be doing that by now, I think.
Yeah, last season was crucial for Aston Martin. It was sort of make or break. You get a big driver like Fernando Alonso, and of course, Sebastian Vettel retires. Who better to bring in than one of the greatest drivers to ever grace the sport, Fernando Alonso? And of course, they gave him a really, really strong package. So, if that had fallen flat on its face, we could be seeing Fernando Alonso. We could have been seeing Fernando Alonso jumping ship to Red Bull or Mercedes or even Ferrari. So he got in there before Lewis Hamilton. A little return back to the team in red. But no, look, like you say, Seb, it does seem a little bit, unambitious from Fernando Alonso. But if you look at the team's ambition on the grid, I don't think anyone is quite as, self-respected as Aston Martin, if that makes sense. Look, if Drive to Survive is anything to go by, Lawrence Stroll is one ambitious man, and he has big plans. He's got a big vision for Aston Martin, big pockets as well. So that's obviously a big thing. I can imagine they're paying Fernando Alonso I don't know how to put it.
A hell of a lot of money.
There we go. They're giving him a lot of money without a doubt. Of course he does. However you want to put it, he merits it. Yeah, of course it's an obscene amount of money to drive a car. But Amy, what do you think? If you were Fernando Alonso, would you stay at Aston Martin?
I think you've got to look at last season and the car they gave him initially. I think if they had carried on that trend and into this season as well, I think he'd be really smart to stay there. I think he's remembering the car they gave him initially at the beginning of last season and is keeping that in mind. And I think he will be here beyond 2026. I don't know how, but I think he's got that, I don't know how.
He's just a freak of nature.
He really
point,
is. Yeah. But I can see him going beyond that. And I think Aston Martin will be a really good prospect, like we said. It'll be a seat that's wanted by a lot of the grid. And I think they'll do really well under the new regulations. And Fernando Alonso would have been there for the last 3 years that would be, and he would have put himself as the pinnacle of that team, and they would have built around him a lot of trust, and he'd be the driver for them. And if they have a great car, he'd get everything, and he'd go and win a championship with, I guess you could go Red Bull, but he'd go and win it with a new team winning the championship. That's a big if, but I think it's pretty smart. Who realistically could bring the challenge to Max Verstappen in a Red Bull right now? I don't think many I think maybe one, maybe two drivers could currently do it on the grid.
And is Fernando one of them?
I don't think he is.
Really?
Wow.
I think he'd bring a fight. I think he'd bring much more of a fight than Checo, but I don't think he'd beat him. I think he'd win races there, Fernando, but I don't think he wants to win races. Why not make it self-established in a certain team? And he would be the Max Verstappen of Aston Martin and going forward past 2026. So I think it's a good idea, but I do definitely understand that to me, it does look like he's backing down from a fight from Max Verstappen, but I don't think he could beat him. I really don't.
What about Mercedes, though? That was obviously the other seat on offer that you went for, Rudy. Do you think he should have gone there, or...?
Well, it's an interesting one, really, because Mercedes have been poor last few years. And, I mean, of course, the regulation change is a great reset button for any team like Mercedes, who should be at the top, that are struggling to, really compete. Take Red Bull, for example. It took them ages, in that sort of cycle of regulations between 2018 and 2021. It took them right up until the very end to actually be competing at the front. And then 2022 was a bit of a runaway season, particularly in that second half. And so Mercedes could follow suit. Maybe next year they could have a better package, maybe score some more podiums, maybe a race win here and there. They did it in 2022 at the end of the season with George Russell. But then obviously 2026 is a great reset button. And Mercedes, in the last few regulation changes, they do tend to thrive when things are reset a bit. Look at 2016, for example. Nico Rosberg brought the championship home. 2014 as well. Hamilton convincingly bringing the championship home there. So yeah, look, 2026. Again, we're still very much up in the air about it, but it would have made sense for Fernando to jump ship, although, like I said, there is that ambition feeling with Aston Martin, and it's in this sort of environment where Fernando truly thrives. I mean, of course, Lance is a bit of a staple there as that sort of team's second driver for as long as Lawrence is in charge, basically. And whether that's good or bad, we'll have to wait and see, because there's of course, there's room for improvement for Lance Stroll. But we know there is a decent driver in him. But what I'm trying to get at here is that this kind of environment Fernando thrives in. You look at when his teammates are fire and fury to him. Take Stoffel Van Dorn, for example. 2017, 2018, while on paper in terms of point scoring, not Fernando's finest hour, he did put in some phenomenal drives on a rather consistent basis. And then you look back to when he joined the sport again in 2021. There we go. He had that really heated and feisty relationship with Esteban Ocon that started off quite well. You look back to the podium at Hungary, the race win at Hungary, and the podium at Losail as well. But then in 2022, that relationship got frosty, and Fernando really wasn't at his best. But now he is convincingly better than Lance Stroll. I think we have all sort of come to that agreement, and it's quite obvious by now. And if he has that sort of staple first driver position with a teammate that's nowhere near as good as him, sorry Lance, then I think it is those conditions where he thrives in. And of course, while I love Fernando Alonso, that is a man who does hold grudges. And with Honda coming back into the sport, especially with Aston Martin in 2026, you look at his history with Honda, this is huge for them, considering how much of a sort of career roadblock those engines were in the McLarens to him, sort of, in that time period between 2014, 2015, up until 2018, where they were really, really bad. So yeah, this is just a huge move for most parties, really, and I'm quite surprised. It did surprise me to see that he had signed an extension, considering that Red Bull seat probably was on the cards. So yeah, let's properly move on to Carlos Sainz now, a man who idolised Fernando Alonso growing up, got it out eventually, and yeah, so that does shut the door for him going to another team like Aston Martin. Seb, where do you see Carlos Sainz going in 2025, 2026?
I do think Mercedes is now the most likely option. We obviously saw those rumours. I don't know whether they were a joke or what, saying that he was confirmed to be signing for Mercedes. I don't think that's true, but I do think they're the most viable option for him now. I think obviously we talked about stake in Sauber before in the past. I think it's too big of a risk. Yeah. I think especially with their performance this season, going forward, I just can't see it. Even with the Audi thing, I do think 2026 is a really good opportunity for them. I think it's too soon, and Carlos he's not the youngest driver on the grid. He hasn't got absolutely ages to be, going around sniffing in the midfield.
Well, if he's anything like Fernando Alonso, he's got another 20 years in him.
Well, yeah, but I think obviously Alonso's a freak in my opinion. Yeah. I don't think Sainz is going to be doing that. So I think Mercedes is the best option. I think 2026, you never know. They could be best, could be the best team in 2026. Yeah. It's the best option for him. I think he'll get a 2-year contract whilst they wait for Antonelli, and there's the opportunity to be the best in the team. I don't think Russell's made a big enough stamp on the side that he is definitely the true team leader. I think there's opportunity there for someone like Sainz to go in and be the team leader, and maybe Russell could be one that's booted out in a couple of years for Antonelli instead. So I think Mercedes, I think that's where he's going to go.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Kimi Antonelli. Of course, for those of you somehow unfamiliar, this is Mercedes' sort of little wonder kid that they've got competing in Prema in Formula 2 at the moment. And basically, Toto Wolff has, I believe, come out and said, if we're not looking too quick in 2025, we might promote Antonelli early, just because there is a lot less risk factor there. There's a lot less to lose. And so that also possibly shuts the door for Carlos Sainz going into 25 for Mercedes. But that definitely is the move that certainly makes most sense on paper now. But it's a case of, with Audi coming in, huge expectation, huge funds, and of course, his dad. Now, Carlos Sainz Sr. possibly a huge reason as to why Carlos is where he is in his career today, and there may be a bit of sort of, I don't know, parental persuasion for him to go and join Audi. I've done all this for you, now you go and join Audi. Maybe I'm just making up a story there, but something like that can happen in the world of Formula One, especially considering how emotional and attached you can get to a team. Of course, Carlos Sainz Sr., for those of you unfamiliar, has seen huge rally success with Audi as a team, and so of course with them replacing Sauber in 2026, there could just be a bit of an unfair reason for Sainz not to join Mercedes. But yeah, Amy, where do you think Sainz will end up?
Oh, this is hard. I think where I want him to end up and where I think he will end up is different. I want him to go to Red Bull. I don't see the point in Mercedes because I do think he's genuinely going to be there for maybe 2 seasons, and then maybe go to Audi or maybe even retire. He'll be 32 by then. But I think why not go Red Bull if it's being offered? I think there's a bit of a difficulty there with Red Bull at the minute because Perez might get signed again because he's doing all the right things this season. He's doing the job. He's going to get P1 in constructors for Red Bull currently as it goes, P2 in the championship for himself. So why not? But if that was to open up, I think I really like Carlos Sainz as a driver. And if he wants to do things, towards the end of his career now, Red Bull's the place. It'd be really good, full circle moment. It'll be Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz started to Toro Rosso together. So I think it'd be a really nice pairing on the grid. But realistically, I'm going to stick with my prediction video of the 2025 driver's standings, and it's going to be...
Which you can check out on the channel, by the way.
Yeah, you can. And I think he's going to go Sauber, and I think he's just going to wait there until Audi come in. I think that works. I think he might as well do that rather than go Mercedes, because I don't think Mercedes is going to do anything until 2026. So why not establish yourself in a team and get to know the people around you and win it with Audi?
I do think it's less risky for his own seat going to Sauber because they're never going to get rid of him for at least in the next 4 or 5 years. They're not going to be pushing him out, whereas Mercedes, there is obviously the chance they could push him out for Antonelli. So I think that's good point.
I mean, this is a great time to this is a great time
good
to be
point.
great point. This is it's a good time to be an F1 fan right now, because this could be the silliest of silly seasons in terms of how many drivers are out of contract at the end of the year and how many teams are going to need replacements. If we move on slightly to Esteban Ocon, teams are sort of thinking about his services, maybe a move elsewhere from Alpine if they don't make the sort of the climb back up the grid that they really need to do, because of course that car has been horrendous this season, and he has so far outperformed Pierre Gasly. This is a version of Esteban Ocon that we've not seen for quite some time. Nico Hülkenberg is sniffing around for a new seat. Apparently he's in negotiations with a lot of teams as well. I mean, I don't know how much substance there is to that, but of course the links to Audi are really strong. Of course, German team, Nico Hülkenberg, German driver. It would make a lot of sense for them to sort of begin their F1 journey with a German driver. Sebastian Vettel rumoured to be coming back to the sport. Yuki Tsunoda might make the move to Red Bull, might make the move to Aston Martin. Who knows? Daniel Ricciardo as well. I just keep thinking of names that are popping into my mind. Logan Sargeant. Yeah, Williams are exploring
Apparently
other
his contract
options.
Doesn't even cover this whole of the season, so you could see him go before the end of the season just because his contract.
Do you think Antonelli could make a step up this year? That would be insane.
Have you got any idea as to where his contract ends? Like, is there a sort of race that
I think it's an ongoing sort of thing.
Oh,
so they could replace him at
pay
any
as you
time.
go sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I think Antonelli. I think in terms of super license points, he is ruled out of.
No, he does. He has enough.
Shut up.
Well, because of Formula Regional.
The kid is a freak. Oh no, but when does he turn 18?
That's the only
thing.
I don't know.
That is
Real
crazy.
lot.
The only thing stopping him from sort of making it to F1 is the fact that he's still legally a child. Yeah, watch this space for Kimi Antonelli. Although it hasn't been an amazing start to his F2 season for him,
It's
to be
August.
fair.
So second half of the season, you never know.
For Logan Sargeant's contract to expire.
No, that's Antonelli's age.
For Antonelli's age.
He's only just turning 18 in August.
18 in August. Could he? You never know. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But who else would they replace him with mid-season?
I don't know. It depends how Zach O'Sullivan does. Maybe in
Yeah.
F2. I'm
Yeah.
not too sure about his super license
Vesti?
point situation.
Who?
Frederick Vesti?
No,
I don't know.
see
There's
that.
there's not enough link there. I don't think. I think they'd rather go for experience as
Yeah.
well. It would make more sense to sort of draft someone in.
I think
I'm not saying him specifically, but Sebastian Vettel, that kind of character, someone
That'd
with loads
really
of experience, because that's really what they need. You know, you take Alex Albon, he's had plenty of experience in F1 by now. Logan Sargeant hasn't. Nick Latifi struggled to really gauge an F1 car despite 3 years that he had in the sport. He always looked like an unexperienced driver in that regard. You know, and
I
then
think it's harsh though. This whole Williams set to explore alternative.
Oh yeah.
Because this season he's really not had a chance. He's had his car took off him due to a mistake of his teammate. And I think he's not been able. It's going to be until Miami where he's going to be able to actually have the car back to show his ability.
But if it's anything like last year, it'll be an absolute travesty.
And they're level on points. You know, they are. I think it'd be really harsh. I don't think they will. But what about Nick De Vries? Bring him back. That's
no.
I don't know that about
I
him,
mean,
he's having a terrible season.
Yeah,
so far
Formula E. It's not gone great for him in Formula E upon his return. A championship that he has won in the past as well, which sort of was the thing that certified in that Williams seat.
Liam Lawson on loan, sort of thing, or something like that. There are options out there.
Mick Schumacher's a Mercedes reserve, so he could come in.
That makes sense.
Knows how to do it.
And on paper, Williams don't officially have a reserve driver either. They have Seb just did some research, and their last known reserve driver was Logan Sargeant in 2022. So obviously he's not the reserve driver anymore. Although he might as well be, considering that he's been given just about as much opportunity as one this season. Look, I know it's harsh to say, but there are definitely better options out there. I mean, I know it's hard to judge Sargeant off his sort of very limited experience in F1 so far, but it has been a pretty tumultuous time for him. He's been, convincingly outperformed.
There obviously will be limited options on the grid for some seats. F1 teams are seeking to make it 10 teams only. Currently, they could have a possible 12, and obviously Andretti want to get in, and they want to, maybe cancel them out completely by not having an 11th team or even having the option to add a 12th team. So that's interesting, especially that, the current teams on the grid are trying to agree to that. I don't know how maybe that would benefit them in certain ways, maybe financially, more money doesn't have to be distributed. But I don't know, I feel like I always say I want 10 teams. I think that's a perfect amount, but completely cancelling that idea out to make it not 12 at all and not having that option, I think that's a bit silly.
I think Andretti would have to explore other options to get into. I still think they'd try to get an F1. I think maybe Alpine. I think that's where they could go for. If Alpine continue to languish at the back and things like that, then maybe Andretti could buy their entrance into F1. I think that could be an option. Obviously, we don't know how committed that Alpine actually are. Yeah,
there were rumours sort of floating about that Alpine were up for sale, but they have been squashed by team principal Bruno Fama. And that does seem like the most logical way for Andretti to sort of get into the sport. There has been this sort of ongoing saga of attempted entry, but the FAA just don't want to seem, they just don't seem interested. Basically, the current Concorde agreement does state that there is room for 12 teams on the grid, and it is sort of quite split up and down the grid. The smaller teams don't really want an 11th team, but the bigger ones don't seem to mind. Sort of make of that what you will. But it's very much a case of this does seem like a deliberate attempt for Andretti to not get into the sport, which is of course extremely harsh, and denying us even more entertainment, because I think, well, this might be sort of quite a one-minded view on it. More teams equals more entertainment, more fights, more overtaking opportunities. I don't know, unless they are like a terrible basically, and they're just sort of miles behind everyone else, but the memes will be funny. So but I think that's about it really. We've had a sort of jam-packed week of news, and we've tried to condense it as much as we can, but dominated by Fernando Alonso headlines once again. But thank you very much for tuning in. Whether you're listening on Spotify or other listening platforms, or watching us on YouTube, make sure to click follow, subscribe, like, whatever it is you are watching or listening on. And do make sure to check out our YouTube channel as well, because we have put out some great sort of video type things on the history of each of the teams on the grid. More of them to definitely come in the near future as well. Seb has already got some in the chamber ready to just click upload, and they'll be out as well. And if you're wondering what's happened to Nikita Mazepin, then there is a really I don't know why you would be, but there is a really informative video done by Seb on the channel as well, which is a great watch, if I do say so myself. Great watch. And so definitely make sure to tune into that, because they are actually, like, jokes aside, they are very good. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.